Hi, friends. Welcome to this week's Nurture the Soul. I'm Reverend Tracy Potter, your Minister for Children's and Youth Engagement, as well as the Director of the Love of Children program. Nurture the Soul is a weekly webinar to share practical, educational, and innovative resources to engage with the critical topics of our time for our local churches and faith practitioners. From cultural and community organizing to congregational leadership, from worship and theology to small and rural congregations, from ministry with youth and children to a wide range of justice issues. We feature guest artists, authors, and key leaders to focus on care and education for the people of God. Nurture the Soul stays current to how God is alive in our time today. We hope that this is a space of connection, community, and nurture for you. For together, we can bring our church, our community, and the world towards the world God imagines for all of us. We hope that you will join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time for Nurture the Soul, and from time to time, look for special offerings. You can find a full list of upcoming events of digital programming at ucc.org/events or any of our social media platforms. Friends, if these conversations move you, if what's offered here helps enhance your ministry or your soul, please consider donating to our annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your prayerful and financial support helps programs like this in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. Thank you for supporting us, and thank you for being with us today. Today, we get to wrap up our three-part series geared towards the love of children and youth. And today, we will be looking specifically at how to build intentional intergenerational ministries and some of the practices that come with it. Before we get started with our conversation, it is my honor to introduce you to three of our guests. First, we have Reverend Kim Nakey, who is the chair of the Association of United Church Educators, as well as the Associate Minister for Faith Formation at Church of the Redeemer and Redeemer UCC in Westlake, Ohio. She lives in Lakewood, Ohio with her wife, her amazing two young children, her cat, and is always on the hunt for a great coffee shop or playground. We also have Reverend Miranda Moeller, who is an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ and is currently serving as the pastor of Millbourne Congregational UCC in Lake Villa, Illinois. With a master's in pastoral studies from Eden Theological Seminary and an MDiv from Andover Newton, Miranda brings over a decade of experience in faith formation and youth ministry to her pastoral practice. Finally, we have Reverend Mary Jane Huber, who is the pastor at St. John's UCC in Merton, Wisconsin. She earned a bachelor's in Christian education from Defiance College and an MDiv from Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. For 15 years, she co-owned Cornerstones Publishing, which created material for worship rotation model of faith formation. For more than 40 years, she's been involved in creative faith formation and has consulted with hundreds of congregations as they explore their own creative options. So welcome to each of our guests. As we prepare, we know that research suggests that children thrive when they have multiple adults, healthy adults who are a part of their life. And being in the church is just one setting where we have the opportunity for young people to have these kinds of intergenerational experiences. So my first question to each of you is, why do you think so many of our churches are not incorporating intergenerational ministry into their context, even though we know it's so important?
I'll go. I think people think it's going to be hard and radically different. I don't know what to expect in that way. And or they don't have any, they think they don't have any kids. And that's been addressed in the prior webinars. And we do have kids, no matter what your context is. But I think people think it's just going to be too hard. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's real. Go ahead, Kim.
Yes, I was going to say that there's also this element of we've never done it that way before. For so many of our churches, for 50 plus years, we've had siloed ministries where kids go one way, youth go another way, adults go this way, and we don't really ever converge. So I think that sometimes churches have a hard time knowing where to begin in order to incorporate intergenerational ministry in their congregations.
Yeah. Miranda, anything to add to that?
I also think that sometimes there's a struggle on the pastor's piece where if you didn't start out in a CE context or a youth ministry context, maybe it's not your strongest skill set, and knowing where to begin can feel overwhelming. And so I think sometimes that overwhelming gets pushed because there's other things that the minister has to deal with too, and you don't know, like Mary Jane said, sometimes you don't even know where to begin and it seems too hard.
Yeah, I think ministry itself is hard these days. So, affirming that all of our congregations and all of our ministers, regardless of context, are struggling with something might be encouraging, even though a little daunting to know that no one person is doing this alone. So thank you for that. My next question I want to ask Kim and Miranda, what does intergenerational ministry look like for you?
So for us, I started at my current position in 2020 at the height of the pandemic, which, as we all know, completely changed the landscape of church. And as a result, it came down to just a couple of parents that were volunteering to teach Sunday school. And Sunday school was in the middle of worship, as it typically is. And they pulled me aside at the end of the last year and said, "We can't do this anymore. We're really burnt out." And I was like, "Great, because I have another idea." So we introduced a playground this year. So that's a huge piece for us. And in addition to the playground, I changed my ministry schedule. So I normally just do the common lectionary and stay focused on that unless it's Lent or Advent. But instead, I added a total of 4 sermon series where the kids actually every week helped tell the Bible passage. So we just built on the story and they were participating. We also have kids that act as lay readers throughout the year instead of the one Sunday that it's Youth Sunday, so that they are part of our voices all the time. And then we do Messy Church. And the last thing that I did this year, which I'll probably figure out a different way to do it next year, but I hid 40 mini Jesuses throughout the church. And I added each Jesus had a spiritual practice, a fellowship item, or a service project to do. And you had to do it, you had to take pictures with Jesus and whatever you were doing. But I made kid-friendly ones too that the kids could find and participate in. And it was a really wonderful way to get younger folks and older folks together doing things that they normally wouldn't do together. And we took away a lot of limitations on, you have to be this old to be able to do this thing. As long as there's a guardian with them, they can participate in a variety, because we have Adopt a Highway. And first they were like, no one under the age of 13, because you don't know what you're going to find. And this year we had a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old that were just as happy to help. And as long as they have an adult with them, they can do it. So those are just some of the ways that we do it. I don't like to separate the kids from the adults because I think there's learning that can be done on both ends, and it's really beautiful to watch.
I love it. I think I'm going to start hiding some Jesuses around my house and see how my son responds.
I had
to
to be clear that I could only get white Jesuses and remind people that Jesus wasn't white. But aside from that, it was awesome.
Cool. Kim, I want you to go ahead, and then Mary Jean, I've got a question for you after that.
Sure. So we started a messy church this year in our congregation. We are a very small worshiping congregation on the west side of Cleveland. And we decided that we would just dive head on into this program that brings all ages together for singing, worship, story, activities. And we literally have people aged 2 through 90 who not only volunteer, but participate in the activities that we do at Messy Church. And it's a really neat thing to see everybody gathered together in one space and around what, all of these tables kind of doing activities together. Our program usually happens on Sunday afternoons. We were really intentional about wanting to make it intergenerational. And so we thought a great time would be Sunday afternoons that would hopefully engage some young families to come and join us. It's that last stretch before the week begins, and there's a free meal. It's all free. So people can kind of come and then eat and head home and start the bedtime routine and get ready for the week ahead. And then for our older folks who don't like to drive at night, for most of our messy churches, it ended before it got dark. That was different for the middle of December. But for the rest of them, they ended before it got dark outside. And so our older folks who don't enjoy driving at night could be part of it too. And they also enjoyed the meal and the fellowship as well as the activities. So yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing this year. We did 6 to start and have really enjoyed seeing how that's transformed our church a little bit.
I want to echo and lift up what you said, Kim, that, and intergenerational ministry isn't just about the children. So the fact that your congregation was able to see some of the limitations just around visibility and daylight, and to make sure that it was inclusive for everyone, like that's unheard of. Mary Jane, knowing that you have over 40 years of experience that you're bringing to this congregation, I want to ask you, how has intergenerational ministry changed from when you first entered congregational setting to now? What kind of shifts have you seen as far as members, church, and the place of children?
Everything that I've learned is that children are not like the future of the church. They are the church. That's been a little different in different settings that I've been in, because I've been in large congregations where, the 400 kids went somewhere else, as Miranda had indicated earlier. I think because of congregational life change over the last 40 years, that's just a given. Congregations are thinking we have to do something different, though. What Kim said, we've always done it this way, isn't working. Hasn't worked for a while. And so people are more open to the idea of doing something different. And my own congregation, they didn't know me before they got me. But I'm willing to try anything. I have lived by the 409 theory for a long time. And if you're familiar with the cleaner, I have it in my office on display on the cabinet over there. At all times, it goes to council meetings with me. Sometimes it shows up in worship, because 409 got its name by 408 failures. So we're willing to try things and let it go and see how it works. And this particular congregation has been truly blessed. We have children. Well, I don't serve anybody older than 9 years old. The entire congregation is 9 and under. Because that's periodically we recalculate our age. And I'm 66, so I'm an old lady here. And I calculate my age by adding 6 plus 6 together. I get 12. I add 1 plus 2, I'm 3. So no one is older than 9. I have a 91-year-old. She is one with a lot of experience. And periodically we engage during worship in activities that gather our age groups together, and have open-ended questions that they can answer. And from one of the links of Faith Talk cards for kids have great sets of questions, but they've fostered lots of conversation that way. And just, we all have something to learn. And if we're all children of God, then let's have at it.
Thank you for that. I'm going to start recalculating my age now that I've aged out of the official young adult years. Going to start over. Um, I want to ask, in children's and youth ministry, those leading those departments oftentimes feel like they're on an island. It's just them. Nobody understands the work that they're doing. So it's easy to feel siloed and that the challenges you are experiencing are unique to you. Nobody else understands it. So I want to know if each of you could kind of talk about some of the challenges you've experienced as you've started intergenerational ministry. And we'll start with Kim. Let's go Kim first.
Sure. So for Messy Church, it was a pretty foreign concept for our congregation when we started talking about it. I think one of the biggest ways to overcome the challenge of the unknown was to just talk about it for a long time before we actually started it. I think people really had no idea what to expect. And so when we kind of laid out what the schedule was going to look like, some of the activities we were going to do, it helped to give them a feeling of comfortability around the idea of coming. And then when they actually came, they were like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. So just encouraging people to come and show up and give it a try. And if they don't like it, they never have to come again. But 9 times out of 10, they will come to whatever intergenerational program and enjoy it and have a good time and learn something about other people in the congregation that they didn't know, and learn something about God or themselves that they didn't know as well. So I think that was the biggest challenge for us, was people really didn't know what it was, what Messy Church was, until they came and experienced it for the first time. And once we got people through the door, they thought, wow, this is really cool. This is fun.
Great. Mary Jane, what challenges have you experienced as you've engaged in intergenerational ministry?
Sometimes finding resources. I'm extraordinarily creative and have a lot of resources that I've written over the years. But I think for other congregations, like, where do I start without something like the tools of Messy Church or the material that's on the workshop rotation model, websites, things like that, where you just, what stuff do you do other than coloring sheet? Because that's what a lot of people know. And we have a very firm no worksheet policy. One of the things we did was, one of the first things I did was use Lego. So this is the Brick Bible. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing and fun. But I just took, Legos, and we just had at it. They had to create a story out of that. And so it's just sometimes finding the creative resources can be a challenge to folks.
Miranda, did you have anything to add as far as challenges that you and the congregation have experienced?
So I had to be particularly intentional about the playground and how I was going to do that, because it was so different from anything they had ever done. And I was introducing the concept of children being in worship. So the first thing that I did was I found two of the matriarchs in the congregation and got them invested and got their approval, if you will. And that helped. But then kids make noise, and our playground is up front. And sometimes they make noise in the middle of my sermon. And that can be distracting. And I think that's been one of the particular challenges that we have faced, is that we have to learn how to deal with noise. What adults don't realize is that they also make noise in their seats. They're, crumpling the bulletin or snoring or, I have farmers. It's not me. They're asleep because they got up early. But I had to be intentional about printing off things that went in our pews about we welcome the sounds of children, and children, the noises mean that our congregation is alive, and so this is how we come together as community. And I did several sermons throughout the year on what it means to be community and what it looks like. And I think that's been one of the challenges. I also think there are some people who are not happy with the playground. They're just not. And honestly, nothing that I do is ever going to make them happy. So sometimes you just have to breathe through that and understand that for all the ways that some people may be disgruntled, there's some really beautiful things that have come out of it. Like sometimes the craft for the day or whatever they're doing intentionally while listening to me, we've had adults come and sit with them and also participate, which has been really wonderful, and something that I don't think people foresaw happening. But there's a richness, I think, in our worship that wasn't there before, that is there, that people see and have started to see. And sometimes the couple of people that are really curmudgeon about it, they just are going to be curmudgeon about it. And you have to know that what you're doing is more important than the really irritated people, I think. It's a
Uh,
risk.
It is a
for
risk.
those that are, oh, go ahead, Mary
I was
Jane.
gonna say, in my congregation, I have the children help bless and serve communion. And there's an open table for everybody, and we did it prior to COVID. During COVID, I have pictures of kids at home blessing their elements, so they know what they're doing. But for some of my older members in particular, they're really, really nervous that the kids are going to drop stuff. They've been doing this for 10 years. No one's ever spilled. We have the OSHA sign written by a 5-year-old, no spills at communion. But I also gives me an opportunity to then talk to the kids about how sacred this is. We're not just handing out juice and bread. This is a sacred thing. So I want you to do it carefully. And I want you to realize that for some people, this is a really solemn and quiet time. They want just to receive the gifts of God in this way. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to respect those persons who have given me a little bit of, I'm not really happy with this, because they're afraid they're going to drop it. And then they sit there and worry about the kids that are going to drop it. And the holy and sacred nature of the meal that we share together. And we've made some adjustments here and there, but the kids love it. And a couple of weeks ago, I don't know, not this last month, month before, I just stopped in the middle of the liturgy and the kids finished it. And so the adults looked and were like, oh, participation matters. As Albert Einstein said, learning is experience, everything else is just information.
Miranda, I want to ask you a question. You mentioned the prayer ground, and I know what it is, but some of our listeners and viewers may not know what a prayer ground is. Can you tell us what it is and what you have in it?
Sure. So for us, a playground is just any space in your sanctuary that you have created to be kid friendly, age appropriate friendly. We took out the first 2 pews because no one sits in the first 2 pews. And we got a washable rug from Amazon and put that down. And then for us, we just have, I know some playgrounds, depending on your sanctuary space, you can make this a really big space. I've seen spaces where they have sections for toddlers and infants that have like the bouncy seats and the little run around. I can't think of the name. You put them in and then they run around. And then other books and toys on the ground for kids. We at this moment don't have anyone that's of that age, and our space is much smaller. And so we just have basically a long table that has fidget toys. So we have little poppy dinosaur keychains, we have kinetic sand, we have just a variety of things that for sensory moments and people that need sensory objects. And honestly, some of the adults come and take the sensory objects as well. And then we have art supplies, books, and we do an intentional art project while I'm preaching that's going to match what I'm preaching about. So the Sunday that I did peace for Advent, they made peace cranes, and then we made a banner with them. So it's just a space in your sanctuary that welcomes children and young people, and acknowledges their wiggles and their interests and their, we've gotten to the point where the kids are sitting there and they now share prayer requests, which is really pretty. I think it's pretty wonderful. So is that a helpful definition?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't know if Mary Jane or Kim, if you have prayer grounds, but I do want to ask you, for those that don't have experience with a prayer ground, it may seem just like a play area of, we're just going to drop our children off and let adults pay attention. But research seems to suggest that there's also faith formation that happens in that space. So can you talk about what that faith formation looks like, and why it's so important to have the prayer ground, as opposed to just letting children be somewhere else? And that's for Miranda specifically, but like I said, Kim and Mary Jane,
I
I know
wasn't
Kim,
sure
you
if
have
it was
some
still for
experience.
me specifically. So
Any of you can answer.
I think what's been most surprising to the adults that were not clear at first, the children are listening to the things that I'm saying. And it's not just they're going home and repeating what Pastor Miranda said. They're drawing pictures and they're using words. There was one Sunday where I used a clip of the song "You Are Not Alone" from Into the Woods, and two of the kids drew pictures that then gave to me that said "You are not alone." So they're picking up these ideas and concepts that we have for so long reserved for older people, and that it's giving them language for their faith. It's giving them a connection to the adults that are around them. It's no longer go learn this lesson that might not even be attached to what's happening in worship. It's we're all doing this together, and the way that they understand and see it is coming through their projects and their art and the way that they talk and the way that they're participating now. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Mary Jane or Kim, did you want to add something?
For me, I just wanted to continue with that thought of listening, just children being in worship and hearing what's going on. I was serving a church once where the parents sent me a video of the child at home, and they had taken their bread from breakfast and broke it, and they said, "This is my body broken for you." So the kids are listening. They hear what's going on, and the fact that our church, at least, currently the one I'm serving, worship looks the same just about every week, and kids thrive on that routine and the repetition of what happens. And so when it gets to be time to pass the peace, my 2-year-old son knows it's time to hold up his little peace sign and say peace, peace, peace. So worship is set up really well for children to learn and be part and understand what's going on during that time.
Yeah.
And if you're a pastor and ask a rhetorical question in the middle of a sermon, sometimes you get an answer.
The next question I want to ask, sometimes we're afraid to take that first step. We see that there's a need, but we don't know quite how to go about it. So how would you all give permission or encouragement to different groups or committees in your congregation to lead events or activities that invite different generations to come together? Basically, how do we take that first step to become intergenerational ministries?
My folks know that there are only 9, so they're good. And I just put up sheets and they could sign up for a variety of different projects that we had going on. And so the kids signed up. And so I have a 3rd grader on my buildings and grounds committee. And when they meet when it's convenient for her and her dad. And when they do stuff, she participates. And so there's very little that a child can't do, especially with guardians or care. So finding other activities and inviting to say, it's a mission team. What are you going to do? We're going to make things for Christmas stuff. Okay, kids can do that. What are we going to make a meal? Kids can cook. Kids can clean up the yard. Kids can prepare the communion elements. Tell me what they can't do. And then just say, your goal as a committee, depending on your structure, is to make sure that a child or more is involved. And it might be the child or the children, people that are serving that committee are involved. What can't they do? Right now in my congregation, they're not allowed to go on the highway cleanup because we're on a very busy road. And they're not allowed to serve on council by our constitution. That's it. So only 2 things kids can't do.
So for me, it was knowing the congregation, knowing personalities and who. I did a lot of learning what gifts people have, and especially for Messy Church, I introduced it through a November service to serve worship, so that they could get an idea without it being outside of worship time. They could see what that would look like. But I made sure to have buy-in from people that had talents and gifts that work well in a messy church setting or just in general. And that's why knowing who in your congregation is exceptionally important, because you may think that Elmer, who's 80 years old, wants nothing to do with this, but Elmer may build birdhouses and be willing to set up a birdhouse station. So not discounting people who have never been on CE or who have never had children does a disservice, because those folks have things to offer too, and sometimes they will be your biggest advocates. So that's how I started. It was watching, learning, and talking, and then giving the plug of, I know you do this thing. Wouldn't it be great if?
I love it. There's a question from one of our friends, and I think this isn't unique to them, but a lot of our congregations may be in a similar situation of you only have one baby, one child. How do you then incorporate the prayer ground? Especially if a congregation doesn't think it's worth it because you only have the one. What advice do you have?
That's always the chicken and the egg question, right? I think making people aware of the fact that if you don't have it, then you're making a statement that's just as loud as if you do have it. So if you don't have it, what you're saying is children are still separate. We might not even recognize that there's a child here because there's only one baby, but that baby is still a part of the congregation. And so making space says we acknowledge your existence, and you deserve to take up space too. And a playground in that situation can look like a rocking chair and a blanket on the ground and some toys and mirrors and things like that. It doesn't have to be very big. You can start small. I saw that there was something about asking about further resources for further ideas. I will try. I just did a lot of research on other churches, so I will see if I can gather up where I found other resources, so those can be sent out to help people. So
Yeah.
I didn't invent this.
For us as well, even if we have one kid in our congregation, having the prayer ground there um, shows that kids who show up or might come with their grandparents or show up for the first time with the family, that there's a place for them, that they are valued, that there's something cool there for them too. So even if you don't have any kids, just having that prayer ground there in your sanctuary shows that when someone shows up, there's something for them there. And that sends a huge message, I think.
Some of you, if you were at General Synod, saw that we introduced the prayer ground for the first time in 2023. So we also have a growing list of things that we used. And as part of the Love of Children program, we are actively going to be putting together prayer ground bundles. So we're not quite at the point of pushing that out yet. But do know that that is one of the things that we are working on to be able to offer. So more to come with that later. Another question I have for each of you is that, you're doing this intergenerational ministry. You've had the challenges, you've had some successes, but can you talk about how your church and its members have changed as a result of being engaged in intentional intergenerational ministry?
I'll say a few things and then I'll be quiet because I could go on for hours. I have in the corner, I don't know if you can see in the back corner, I have two stick ponies because we're going to be doing the Olympics of Faith, and those showed up because I have an equestrian in my congregation. People have go to her event. My congregation does not stay inside the walls of the church at all. They are at each other's events. They show up at each other's houses. And they didn't do that before. They were always kind and lovely people, but they didn't extend it outside the church. Because they now know each other in a different way, they really do extend it outside the church. And that has been such a rich blessing for not only the youth that people are showing up, non-parental adults are showing up at their event, but the community has noticed that, oh, that's the St. John's crew.
Cameron, Miranda, how have your congregations and members been positively impacted because of the work that you're laying?
Sure. For us, during COVID, a big event that the church did annually kind of fizzled out. People were burned out. It was time to let it go. And that was a big part of the church's identity, I learned when I got there. People talked about it constantly, wondered if it was ever going to come back. Some people will say, yes, it will. Others will say, definitely not. And so starting Messy Church this year, I think has given the congregation a new energy in this post-COVID world and what it means to be church. I think it's given them a new vision for what they would like to be as a congregation and in the community of Westlake, Ohio. And so, yeah, I really think that it's given them those two things. As a church, we've just had so much excitement around Messy Church and then kind of a new vision for who we are as a congregation moving forward, looking quite different than we did 5 years ago.
Great.
I think for us, our people are starting to get to know each other on a different level than they our younger families are getting to know our older folks. Our older folks are getting to know our younger people, and actually have conversations that didn't always happen before. And I think what Kim said about identity has been really important. It's given a sense of identity and a sense of vision, which we haven't had for a long time. And so we are beginning to really understand in a more concrete way who we are and who we want to be and how we want to get there. And I think those are all really positive things that have come out of it. And we've had a really good amount of visitors and some new members, and some of the reasons, even if they didn't have children, that they have joined us is because they see the way that people are treated, and it's something that they're looking for when they're looking for community. So that's been really wonderful to see too. And I think we all know that a lot of families no longer live near each other. So it's sort of almost created another dynamic in which there's support that hasn't always been there. And there's ways that people have had holes in their family systems or things like that, those gaps are being filled in new ways. It's really lovely.
I think if
go ahead.
If COVID showed us anything, it's that people really need connection. They really need authentic connection. They need to know that they're seen, that they're heard, that they're valued. And that doesn't matter what age you are. And that, I think, is what intergenerational worship experiences within the church that you do, whether that's in the worship experience, whether that's in the afternoon kind of thing with Messy Church, or whether that's in a service project, or tying tie blankets, or making food, or cleaning up something. It's being known. It's just huge. And, we're coming out of COVID, feels like a long time ago now. People want to be known, period. And authentic connection and relationship is pivotal to human well-being, regardless of age.
You've talked about what the congregation has learned and how they've been impacted, but what have each of you learned or gained as a result of leading the charge with intergenerational ministry?
I have learned that God keeps showing up. In UCC, we talk about the still speaking God, and God keeps showing up because when you engage in intergenerational ministry, you have to orient yourself toward abundance. And that's a shift from, we've always done it this way, and the church is declining and all this kind of, and once you orient yourself toward abundance, it's just way too much fun because God keeps showing up in ways you cannot plan, you cannot coordinate, and I am not in control of it. Yes.
Kim and Miranda?
Yes, flexibility to have God show up, I think, is one of the biggest things I've learned. That if something goes sideways, it'll go a new way, and you may not have expected that, and some wonderful things may occur because of it. So for me, the flexibility, willingness to adjust, that's where God moves, as Mary Jane said. So I think that's a huge part of what I've learned. Also that intergenerational ministry, I think, needs to be intentional. It's not just going to happen. Sometimes I think that, right, that's why we're here, is that we need to be intentional about making it happen in our churches. And yeah, there needs to be that aspect of intentionality to it.
Yeah.
My current position is my first solo position. And I got stuck in this feeling as though I needed to be like my predecessor. who had been here for a long time, and I kept trying to do that, and I kept trying to do that, and it veered me away from my own call, and I got really, really burnt out. And going back to some of my more creative roots and finding my voice through intentional intergenerational work has reinvigorated my call and been inspiring to me, and reminded me that my voice is just as important as my predecessor's voice, and that what I have to offer is good for this time that we are in. It is different, but it is good for this time. And so that's really what it's done for me.
Kim, you've mentioned Messy Church a few times, and I have experience, but there may be others that don't. Can you say a little bit about why you all chose Messy Church and some of the advantages to it?
Sure. Yeah, we chose it kind of because we wanted to try something new. And we thought that it would be a really cool program to try in our little congregation. We just put a small team together of people to begin, and um, it has kind of grown in our congregation to be something that people love coming to, no matter what they're doing on that Sunday afternoon. They'll show up to volunteer or show up to just be part of it um, and participate. And so, yeah, we just kind of got started. I'd heard about it for several years beforehand and was kind of waiting for the right time to start. And it just kind of seemed like the right time to start. And it seemed like the church was ready for a new opportunity. And having some people who were ready to start a planning team was crucial in making that happen. So yeah, I think that's kind of how it began. Was we just wanted to try something new, and Messy Church sounded like it would be a good fit for. Yeah.
Mary Jane, is there a particular resource that you want to lift up for people who are getting started in intergenerational ministry, something that has helped you along the way?
Oh, there's a ton. I put them all on the resource thing. And a lot of them aren't new. And so I kept looking for new stuff. But one book I would lift up, it's a book called Fashion Me a People by Maria Harris. And what it does is looks at the life of church as curriculum, and that everything we do is faith formation, where we put the bathroom signs, how we do anything. And she goes through different dimensions of church life and lays out where faith formation happens in those spaces and dimensions of church life. And that for me was a really, really helpful resource. I read it many, many years ago and shaped my understanding of what faith formation is. It is not just what happens in Sunday school. It's not just the curriculum. It's the no curriculum. We don't have any place for children in the worship space. That's curriculum. Or we do, that's curriculum. Well, how we share our faith. So I just, it's not a brand new book. Other people may have done new iterations of that, but it's one that I go back to as a base to say everything we do, absolutely everything is faith formation. Therefore, everything we do is already intergenerational.
As our time draws to a close, why does this matter?
Authentic relationship. I mean, everything we've talked about today and in the 3-part series is about how you have authentic, life-giving, supportive relationships. And that doesn't happen in a vacuum. And everybody needs them.
Miranda, why?
I think it's church. It's the future of church. I think that as we continue to figure out what church means, In this postmodern world in America, intergenerational ministry will lead us forward.
I'm going to sound like I'm repeating Mary Jane, but I guess we just have similar thoughts. It creates the community that I think we've always needed to have and have wanted to be, but didn't know how. And I do sincerely believe that everyone really wants to be seen and heard and believed. And this kind of intergenerational work builds relationships in ways that you do get seen and heard at times, maybe more than you have been. And so I just think there are so few places in society now that people of different ages and different backgrounds and experiences actually come together. The fact that church still exists as one of those spaces says a lot. And I think as long as we keep cultivating that, it's going to remain a really sweet spot in society because we really do need it. We need each other.
I think that kind of sums it up as to why we do this work. It's easy to try to say children's ministry is X and youth ministry is that. But it's all about being the church. And if anything, it's our hope that the last 3 weeks that as we've talked about the love of children and youth, is that we've highlighted different ways that all of us can participate in this work. Whether you are the director of Christian ed, you are the associate or senior pastor, you are just a concerned parent or caregiver, each of us has a role in this work. Whether it's the one child in church or you have none, you come into contact with children almost every day. So we are excited about what's to come as we continue to roll out the Lilly-funded Love of Children program. And some of the exciting ways that we hope to be church together. Next week, we will transition to something different outside of traditional children and youth ministry. We will have our racial justice ministries and join the movement toward racial justice. Invite you to honor and celebrate Juneteenth by remembering and discovering healing practices that sustain freedom in the bones of our ancestors before and after emancipation. We invite you to explore the rich historical legacy of Juneteenth with us. Come listen and learn from educators, organizers, activists, and the next generation leaders. Remember that God is still speaking. So be sure to register for that webinar. As always, we are grateful for your presence, your gifts, and your questions. Remember to join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Nurture the Soul. You can find the full list of upcoming digital programming offerings or previous webinars at ucc.org/events or any of our social media platforms. I am going to invite Reverend Mary Jane to give us our benediction and close out our time together.
And I'll do so with some words from Parker Palmer. It is the dance of spiraling generations in which the old empower the young with their experience and the young empower the old with new life, reweaving the fabric of human community as they touch and turn. You are a child of God, blessed, beloved, gifted. Go therefore from this time with that blessing in your heart to live and be the love of God. Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.